Hello everyone, my name is Boulevard, and like so many content creators before me, my creative coffers have run completely dry, which means I have to resort to reacting to things, and what better thing to start reacting to than the 4.1 balance patch preview that the devs are putting on this fine Monday evening, so we get a live look at some of the balance. Now, I don't know what's happening here, if we're getting like all of the balance, if we're getting some looks into rotation, or what's happening, but it's the whole point of a reaction video, folks. I haven't seen this stuff before, because it's currently happening live. So, cut it up, put it on YouTube, and boom, you've got some content.
The patch goals.
Light nerf package, champ and other archetype buffs, 2 new cards.
Yeah, so
Path of Champions changes. Those Path of Champions changes better be safe for the end. I don't care. I do know that people really like it when things get buffed rather than nerfed, though, but those have created some problematic metas in the past. One of the first, like, really sort of big issue metas that we had was like Darrowing, Bald Eagle stuff. That was the result of like the first time they did a major round of buffs, and I still remember so much about that meta.
Yeah, so
it wasn't bad, but it was definitely like it really overhauled things. But lately, it feels like we've been getting a lot of like filler buffs. So when they say a lot of buffs, I'm not really like, that doesn't mean as much as it used to. It feels like. I don't hate this. I don't know if it's the direction that I would have gone. Sunny's video on Katarina recently was very well put together, and I do like Katarina as a control tool. I do think she was a bit more of a problem in Red Gwen. I don't know if like one attack is gonna really change that much. It could though, right? Because you can chump block her a lot better, so you actually do save a very good amount of damage in like the early game. But I do think that Katarina is still going to be strong. We'll have to kind of see what other nerfs come on top of it. Maybe the play is to mute them when I want to talk. So yeah, I'm going to mute them when I decide to talk. So if that was rough to listen to because both of us were talking, that was the only time, I promise. Oh, hold up. Let me read this real quick. Kill a unit with total power and health of 4 or less, or destroy a unit's equipment. Okay, so you can't kill 1/4s anymore. You can kill Katarina now. So what else does this kill that's relevant? I'm trying to think of like aggressive cards that this didn't hit before that it doesn't hit now. Like I can't think of any 3/1s that really exist that this hits now. But as far as things that it no longer hits, Seraphine, Vigar are definitely the most notable ones. Depending on, like, Frostbite is now a lot worse with this. Oh, they're saying they tested at 5 total power. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, they just mentioned that like if you damage a unit, that counts towards Quietus. So I do not love that you could just kill a Vigar for 1 mana, but I did really like that you could kill a Seraphine for 1 mana. But I think that's more of an issue with Seraphine's stat line, more so than anything. Like either Vigar should have more health or Seraphine should have less health. So yeah, I like this Quietus change. I think it's almost certainly going to see less play here because, again, I don't think this really lets you hit much that it didn't hit before. It just has less targets. 4 cultists for Kayn instead of 3. This is going to make it a lot harder to get Kayn on curve, which I think is very good. Generally, you're not going like 1, 2, 3, 4 cultists because you need to get a weapon in there somewhere because, I mean, you're pretty much only playing Kayn Aatrox. So, I mean, you can obviously still do it because you have so many like cheap cultists. There's like 6 1 mana cultists in every deck. Ultimately, though, I like it. I think that Kayn was coming down on curve way too consistently and then would also just get Aatrox on curve as consistently because Kayn comes down and equips a weapon and would tutor out the Aatrox. So, yeah, I like this change. Although it is kind of unfortunate because I think that was really the only great Kayn deck we've ever had. Oh, 3+ different other. It's
kind of seem to push a little.
Okay, yeah. So
and so
I'm gonna let Brian talk real quick.
Is fixing a bug, which is that his text always said 3+ different Darken, but didn't actually count that.
Thank you. Thank you. I had this whole fucking issue as a caster where when I'm trying to figure out if the next card is gonna like tutor Aatrox, I couldn't tell because it was bugged and it didn't work properly. And oh my god, that's vindicating to know that I wasn't crazy and I wasn't counting wrong and I wasn't reading this card wrong. Like it actually was bugged. The other thing that seems weird to me is like once you have tutored one of the Darken and that copy is still in your hand, you're kind of like soft locked from tutoring the second one until you play the one that you tutor. It's so weird how these things work and it's very unintuitive, but I do like that at least they're fixing the wording on how Aatrox work to now be 3 different other Darkener weapons because you could go like one weapon and the next turn like another weapon and then the same weapon, and like that would tutor Aatrox, and that was really confusing reading the card because this is the same wording. So now it just works differently. That's really good for me as a caster, especially because it was one of the big things that you need to do is be able to convey to the audience what is happening, what is going to happen, how these interactions are going to play out. And when we have cards like this that don't function like the wording does, you just end up looking stupid a lot of the time, because either chat is going to, like, the viewer is going to assume that you read the card incorrectly, or because you're not like saying, oh yeah, this is how it works, or like I thought it wasn't going to tutor yet, and then like you go check what the World Ender's wording is. You don't do that on a broadcast. You just end up looking stupid, and maybe someone will look it up later. But yeah, it's good to know that this was a bug that is now fixed.
Is summoning Aegis and summoning Joral considered two different Darkin, or is it the same because it's essentially just Joral inhabiting?
It should be two different.
They're considered the same card. In general, if a card has two different choices, we always still consider it the same card, and that's true for
Oh, wow.
Zeri and other cards that'll count X different things.
Okay, cool. So just to reiterate, if you summon both Aegis onto a champion or a character or unit, and then Joral, it would only count as one Darkin for... Okay, cool.
That is very good to know as a caster.
So this is just a preview. We're actually buffing Alawi in this patch, so this was a really hard choice to make.
It's about time. It's about time.
But the problem with
I think Eye of Naga Kaboros was giving too much to Plunder defensively. Like, Plunder is a very aggressively postured mid-range deck, and the ability to get a burst speed blocker took away a lot of the counter, especially on top of drawing cards. Was just a little bit too much for Bilgewater to have access to. Like, Bilgewater already has very good early game defensive capabilities through, like, you know, Make It Rain and the Powder Kegs and all these, like, cheap, effective units that a lot of other regions don't have access to. So the idea that they also had this sort of late game assurance and just like, oh, there's this really big thing, I'm just going to, like, eye and block it because my opponent got baited into an open attack, I did not like. So I think moving this to focus speed is something that I am a very big fan of here.
really, because we don't want this to be in every Bilgewater deck, basically.
Yeah.
We want it
Might
to
still
be a
be.
little more technical.
Might still be.
Yeah, in general, like burst speed blocking.
Because you still get a burst speed attacker out of it. You just don't get a burst speed blocker, and I think a lot of the toxicity from this card came from the burst speed blocker. But I don't think its play rate should be affected too much.
Yeah, there's
Maybe down to like a 2 of
something
instead of a
they're
3
very
of in
worried
like
for Alawi
most
in
Bilgewater
chat, but
decks.
I want to reassure you guys, wait
But
until
maybe not
this
even
the
that.
end.
It's
Perfectly adequate Death Rocket.
Jinx just like rocketed.
So it's to
up
get excited.
into the map.
Yeah, Jinx will still be good. I like this more than I like 2-mana Rocket. I think dealing 20% of your Nexus health every turn was just way too much, especially given that, like, you've seen people talk about it, where, like, Jinx will just solo a game because you play a Jinx, you get a Rocket, you top deck another Jinx, you get another Rocket, and you get to get excited off of the Jinx, and it's just, like, 11 damage is way too much. Bumping that down to 9, I think, is a lot more relevant than people might give it credit for. We've seen an insane amount of just perfect lethals off of Jinx. Although I do hope that something is given back to, like, discard aggro, because that archetype is struggling, and it's a very classic LR archetype that I would like to see return to form. There was only, like, one of it in the last seasonal. It was, like, it's just all Echo Jinx and Lulu Jinx. So I want to see Jinx return to more of a burn-style deck rather than just being a utility champion. Like, I think having burn attached to a draw 2 is a bit much. I think those probably shouldn't be on the same champion, but I also think it's a little bit too late to kind of go back and change that. So yeah, we're just stuck with Jinx on a Super Mega Death Rocket, draw 2, and burn you. So lowering the damage a bit, I think, is cool. I don't know if I like this more than taking away the 1 to all enemies. Okay, I was talking at Worlds about how Poro Cannon was now on my shit list as like, hey, this card should not do what it does. It was just, there were so many different Poro Cannon abusing decks over the last couple of years. Like, ever since this card came out, it has been in, maybe not always in a tier 1 deck, but it's popped up in quite a few. Just 0-mana discarding stuff is really, really good, so I do like seeing this change specifically. I've been hating on Poro Cannon for a couple of months now. Oh, I just saw on Twitter, someone, I think it was Pepet, just mentioned that you can now hit Poro Cannon off of Burblefish, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but 2 is a base power for Alawi as a 2/6 is quite a bit.
Funny slides that like actually like the quietest nerf is also above tier.
But the only like tier 1 Alawi deck we've ever had was Bard Alawi, so it's been kind of difficult to evaluate Alawi herself because she was only paired with Bard when he was really broken. We didn't really have like Bart or Alawi Demacia and Alawi Ionia, like there were a couple of people that were diehards for them, but they never really took off. It wasn't until we got Bart Alawi. So I think Alawi is still a card that's like very difficult to evaluate because it was really only over that one deck, and that one deck was just Bard, right? So we'll see. I'll see how I feel about this. I am excited for Alawi to come back a little bit. Oh, it's about time this thing spawns on summon. I still don't know if this is playable, but it's just so late game and it doesn't do anything, right? I think this thing would actually... I think Nagakaboros, if it was a boat, maybe. But without being a boat, I think it's relegated to like maybe a 1 of, probably still a 0 of, though. I think you have enough other good spawn things, but we'll kind of see if there's a buff to Riptide Sermon down the line. I have to see what other Alawi changes happen before I can really sort of evaluate Nagakaboros. Yes, this probably is the biggest change. Down to 3 mana. It's always a huge deal in LOR when you change a spell from 4 mana to 3, because obviously now it just goes off of your spell mana. You don't need anything extra. And obviously Tentacle Smash is still going to be incredibly strong in dedicated Alawi decks. So yeah, now it does kind of come down to, do we have dedicated Alawi decks? If those are all of the buffs that we're getting to Alawi, which it looks like it was, I don't know if +1 attack on Alawi and an on-summon on Nagakaboros alongside a nerf to Eye of Nagakaboros is going to do it. I don't think a +1/+1 on Ornn matters. I mean, his stats really sucked for a 7-drop, but we haven't really seen Ornn experimented with since Darken came out. So maybe that's something. Problem is still
This is a
that
pretty mild change.
he's
But,
Freljord.
you know,
Like, you really can't get away from that.
we think that it should.
He's a Freljord champion, and that's an issue.
He was
That's a
probably
big
losing
problem.
for 7-drop.
It looks like Forge as a package is getting buffed, though, so I am very curious about that, because I've always thought that Forge was like a very strong mechanic, just didn't really have the cards to kind of back it up, or the playstyle. Like, it was always better to just like play an Aatrox deck or a Kane deck or something. Okay, rearranging some of the stats on the early drops, definitely good, but it feels difficult to evaluate just a Freljord archetype as a whole, man. Because the only deck we've had that played like a good amount of Freljord cards, I'm thinking like Frostbite midrange, which has been pretty fragile over the last couple of metas, and like Timelines. And Timelines is just like trying to turn its Freljord units into something else. A 1/2 on the Weaponsmith's Apprentice, I don't think that matters too much. The favored artisan stat rearrange definitely matters a little bit more. You also get I don't believe time and dedication is fleeting, so you should be able to pick when you want to do that. I think favored artisan is like a better card now, but I don't know if you're playing a Freljord deck that cares that much about equipment. Forges twice, -1 power. Yeah, again, Freljord archetypes are just difficult to evaluate. It has consistently been the worst region in Legends of Runeterra. Even when I go back and look at the seasonal stats, consistently at the bottom of like the regional breakdown is Freljord. There'll be like, there were some metas we had like 1 Freljord in top cut, and it was like Plunder, right? So it's literally just Sejuani. Freljord midrange has potential. It's one of those archetypes that just kind of keeps getting buffs, and it keeps not being enough. And one day we are going to get the buffs that push it over the edge, and it's going to be broken. But I don't think this is it. I don't think Forge is it, because Forge doesn't feel like a Freljord archetype, right? Like, the best Freljord midrange cards are not Forge cards. They are other stuff. And because these are not splashable into Darken decks, which is where you really want to be forging, I just don't see it, man. Just +1 attack on Maokai, that's it, man. What the hell? This is the weirdest buff I've ever seen, man. +1 attack on Maokai. Not the saplings, Maokai. Like, yeah, you might chump block with your Maokai. This does make him a more appealing 3 of, because we have seen deep decks for a while only run like 2 Maokai, and I think the champion's very strong. So, I mean, it just entices you to run that 3rd copy, which isn't a bad thing. It's just, it's so funny to look at. I straight up did not know that level 2 Jax did not have Overwhelm base. I didn't realize it was attached to the weapon. This actually feels like it makes him worse, right? Because did he level up I don't actually know how old Jax worked. So if old Jax had Overwhelm while he was equipped with his weapon, then this is strictly better. But if level 2 Jax gave you a weapon with Overwhelm on it, then this is worse. But we have seen Jax start to pop up a little bit. I'm trying to remember I think it was like the mastering. Oh, we're already moving on. Okay, we're getting some Weapon Master sub-archetypes for spells like Fish Fight and Roar of Acacia. We saw Roar of Acacia a little bit at Worlds. Like, Smooth was running the, like, 13-weapon Roar of Acacia Vayne Aatrox. And obviously, like, the card looks really good on 3. So the fact that you can now splash this into Jack's decks and you're not forced to go Demacia, so maybe you can go Freljord. I'm starting to see where the pieces are falling together. But it's still just, like, really big stats, which I'm not convinced is the best thing to do in Legends of Runeterra right now. I think that, like, the meta adapts very well when big stats are the thing. But especially when you're not, especially when you're not elusive. Like, if your strategy is, like, elusive big stats, that'll get there. But if it's, like, yeah, give my Jax Overwhelm and forge the shit out of them, I don't know if that's going to be enough. Although, obviously, this is, like, a really good push in the direction. I know that Jax has been, like, fringe playable on competitive. I fucking forgot Tristana was in Legends of Runeterra, man. Oh, I did not remember this champion exists. It's been so long. It was, like, Aphelios. No, Aphelios wasn't even Tristana, right? Was it Physophelios? Yeah, I think it was Physophelios. And then Tristana, we got that Fade deck. What was the Tristana deck that popped up? I think it was still Attach. I think there was like a Tristana attachment deck that was really good. And then the Aphelios stuff started popping up. I don't remember the timeline on this, but I do not remember the last time I saw Tristana. There was like an Atro build for it that was kind of cheesy, but I'm trying to remember what the actual good Tristana deck was that put the champion on the map, and I want to say it was Fae related because I did a deck tech on it for Giant Slayer. And then did she just get pushed out for Aphelios? Is that how this all went down? Rise, like Katarina, is a champion that you do not want to be good. You want them to be a meme. You want them to be the worst champion in the game because their play patterns are annoying and toxic as shit. I know that Rise has not really seen competitive play, but I'm fine with that. You need to have a worse champion in the game. I'm not even convinced it's Rise. Right now, it might even be like Evelynn. Like, when's the last time you saw an Evelynn deck? We had one Eve deck. It was Eve Viego, and then that took Hate Spike. Like, so many cards paid for the sins of Evelynn Viego. Like, Rise isn't even the worst champion in the game. It's Evelynn. Rise is only on the map because he's new. Okay, he just said it might be too much love, so we'll see. But I was really hoping to dodge some Rise buffs, man. I was really hoping we wouldn't get those. What the fuck?
So this is a fairly simple change. Shadow Shift is one of those cards that it just doesn't see any play.
Shadow Shift? The worst champion spell in the game? Shadow Shift? It's getting buffed down to 2 mana. I think I really liked the idea of like the 5-mana Shadow Shift that came out a while ago that like Shadow Shifts your whole board. I thought that card had a little bit of potential, but ultimately just like, you know, shitting out an early board and then like shadow shifting all of them for trades and then replaying it just like isn't anything. But like I did not expect to see Shadow Shift. So Lissandra, for a second there, I was hoping she advanced all Thralls too, and I was like, oh man, Thralls are back, bitch. Thralls is another deck that you do not want to be meta, but I like when Thralls is meta. I'm a big fan of Thralls, so I like when they are meta. So essentially now Lissandra's Thrall is countdown 7 instead of countdown 9, which it's not like a huge deal for Thralls specifically because you can't consistently get the Lissandra on 3. Like now Lissandra on 3 is just as good as Thrall on 1, right? Because if you Thrall on 1, it goes from 9 to 8 to 7 on turn 3. Yeah, so this Lissandra is just now essentially a little bit of a catch-up mechanic for if you hit a Thrall on 1 with countdown 9, which I wanted to see something for the Watcher, man. I thought the Watcher deck was like, it was a deck I was a big fan of. I don't know if cool is the word I was looking for, but the fact that like that win condition is just completely eliminated from the game is not something I'm in love with. I'd like them to find a healthy middle ground. I just don't know what it looks like, but it's not my job to know what it looks like.
If her Thrall
it's their job. And this ain't it. Deck quest.
Do you want to talk about
he doesn't. Did Yi used to have to see the damage? I didn't realize Yi had to see the damage. I was straight up unaware. Because the only Yi deck I've played is Spooky Karma, where like, if I leveled Master Yi, yeah, cool, but it was absolutely not the forefront of my mind. This is interesting, though, because level 2 Master Yi is very strong, So I am curious to see if we can get a more dedicated Master Yi deck now that he is easier to level, where like I just need to deal like 6 with one and then 6 with the second one. This does make him more of a build-around champion, I think, which I'm interested to see. A lot of people aren't going to be happy about that, though. The community's still very against Ionia. Still very, very, very against Ionia being good, so... Shyvana's another champion that's been very good in the past. I don't know if changing the deck quest is... Making her a deck quest and upping it to 16 instead of 12 is a huge deal, because Shyvana never had too much trouble leveling up on her own. And you generally weren't playing any other dragons. Even now, we are far past the days where Screeching Dragon is a broken card. So, unless you're getting this in a dedicated dragon deck, which honestly, I'd have to go back and check what kind of residual buffs dragons have gotten over the last couple of patches to know how realistic that is. My gut says no, but anytime a new expansion comes out, we're probably putting a big dragon in there. So, like, she's a worse mid-range card now. She is a better dragon card, which I guess is kind of what you want to do. But her identity was never really a dragon card. It was always kind of a mid-range card, at least from a competitive perspective, right? When we had decks that we would call dragons, it was like Shyvana, Screeching Dragon, maybe Eclipse Dragon, and then Aesol was like dragons when we talk about like the Lysandra Nasus patch, where it was Watcher, it was Nasus, and it was dragons. It wasn't actually like, the full, discount them, play every dragon that you possibly can. Mountain Drake does get a lot better with the Quietus change, though. And I think Mountain Drake is actually like a really good card. It just never really found a home. And with Quietus getting changed to no longer hit Mountain Drake, maybe we actually do end up seeing something with dragons. I'm not super optimistic for it. I'm not going to be the one vying for it, but I could see it now, because I do think that was like a really big buff for dragons now that the Quietus change is gone. Because previously, like, formidable units were just completely unplayable. But in 06 that Furies for 2, it's actually not bad. Like, that's a 5-drop that trades Aatrox. And like her level 2 getting a lot better does really push you again more towards like the dragon archetype, because of how good Strafing Strike is, even if she gets like Vengeanced or whatever. So I'm trying to remember the last good Shyvana deck we had. I'm pretty sure it was Pantheon. It was like Shyvana Pantheon, and then that got pushed out for Pantheon Taric for the most part. But I'm excited to see what we come up with now. Okay, so she was a 2/6, so now she's a 2/5. The turn that she comes down. Oh no, it's Grant. Okay, so she just is a 2/6, or a 2/5 rather. So effectively, she lost 1 health, because now the summon buff hits herself, which is good because that progresses her level up more. So it's actually good that she lost an attack and hit herself. That's a net positive for Kale. I didn't mute myself, or I didn't mute them rather while I was talking, so I apologize for that. Again, I think people really want Kale to be good because of the identity of the card, but at the same time, when they see Go Tall Targon deck, they get really pissed off. So it's one of those things where the community just doesn't really know what they want. Like, I don't think they actually want Kale to be good. I think they just like her character. At least she's a good finisher. She's a good main deckable finisher, which is one of the areas that Targon actually lacks outside of like Aurelion Soul, but Aurelion Soul is very expensive. I am a little bit worried about just giving us like a 5-mana +1 to board. I've seen too many decks where they get a little bit out of control if you just like, go super wide and buff this up. So I am pretty apprehensive about Kale getting a cost reduction here. I'm not that worried, though. I'm trying to think of, like... Because generally when you see Shyvana, it's like Shyvana Targon, and I'm like, okay, does this Kale buff plus this Shyvana buff do anything? And probably not together. Lucian's a... Hold up, what the fuck? I love that they've had the little Quietus tracker in the corner every time, and now, like, you can just Quietus Lucian. Okay, 1 mana 2/1, I think that's a lot worse. Like, significantly worse, right? The difficulty of Lucian was always keeping him alive and putting him into the range of Vile Feast, of Blade's Edge, now of Quietus even. Like, that was my ring finger, by the way. I don't think this is good for Lucian. I don't think this is the play. Oh, hold on. They're,
No. Quiet,
people are talking about Lucian Azir, Lucian Cannon. Am I the stupid one here? Is this actually broken? Okay, Plink seems to think it's a good change, or like a potentially viable change. So like, we'll see. Lucian decks are just so weird, and they've always been very inconsistent. The only good ones that we've had were, what was it? It was like Azir Lucian which was like the best deck against Lysandra in the Lysandra Nasus Dragons meta. We're getting a lot of callbacks to the Lysandra Nasus Dragons meta today. But there was that, and then there was Hecarim Lucian Grand Plaza, which I don't even think was the best Grand Plaza deck. They've seen the memes. They've seen the memes. Oh, man.
All right.
This is a change that I wanted for Hate Spike initially when it got changed to like 1 mana. I wanted them to nerf it back to 2 mana and like up the damage a little bit. Hate Spike was wild, man. It created so many archetypes. It like put Nasus back on the map. It made Viego Evelyn a deck. I feel like there was one, it was originally played in like very early iterations of Red Gwen. Like if you want to know how far back Red Gwen goes, it was like 1 mana Hate Spike far back. So I'm a little spooked. I'm not going to lie. I did not like the Hate Spike meta. Is it far enough? That's what they just said. I don't know. I don't think this is great. It's kind of hard to say because you probably will grab this off of Telstone more often, which like does make it a net positive change because now it's just like 4 mana removal instead of 5. You're not going for like massive overkill. But it is going to come up in those times where it's like, damn, I really wish I had a 4 mana deal 7 here. So we'll kind of see where we go from here. But like they didn't buff the champion damage or nerf the champion damage, which I think is still like one of the more important parts. Because previously this was actually a really good answer to like Eternal Dancers. Probably the most relevant thing that it used to hit that it no longer hits. Okay. I'm a big fan of the flow cards that came out with Master Yi. So I'm really excited to see both Yi buffed and these things. Dragon Caller I actually think is like pretty strong. You know, I was talking earlier about how like big stats are cool, but like you need to be big stats and have elusive. So the fact that Dragon Caller now comes down on 5, I'm actually relatively excited for it. I don't know if this makes it competitively viable, but it is a card that I like. So if it does become a little bit better, I'll be happy about that. I like the flow mechanic of Ione. I was always a big Lee Sin fan. It's been a minute since we've seen Albus Pharos in Jaceheimer, or even really any Jace deck, right? Because the only ones we had were like Jaceheimer, Jace Lux. Those are the only Jace decks that I can think of that we've ever really had. And Albus Pharos was in very early iterations and then fell out. You'll still see it in like, I guess like memeier iterations. Some people will still like jam it as a 1-of on ladder, but it's pretty rare in Masters. I would say it's like relatively common in like Plat Diamond towards its end of season, but in Masters throughout the season, you're not really seeing a lot of like 1-of Albus Pharos in those decks anymore. And it wasn't really the damage that was the issue. It's just like what you want to be doing in the later stages of the game when you want to be ending things. This does make it much better in like non-Jace decks, which is kind of wild. Like he's getting real close to just attack decimate range. So we'll see how that goes, because one of the issues was like scaling up the damage, because like you would generally only play like 3 or 4 6+ cost spells over the course of a game. So getting up to like 5 or 6. Oh, hold up, new cards. Let's go. I'm so good at reacting to stuff, right? I don't care that there are new cards coming. I only cared about like the buffs and the nerfs. Mostly the nerfs are what I always care about, but like in terms of excitement for me, it's like nerfs, buffs, new cards, which is I think pretty backwards from your more casual player. Shadow Isle 3 mana, slow, kill an ally to summon 2 ephemeral copies of it. So this is a much smaller or a much lower cost Dawn and Dusk, and instead of getting the full 3 copies, you kill something. So like obviously this is geared towards Anivia, right? That's baseline. We can all agree that like this is an Anivia card. That's what it was made for. That's what we're aiming at here. It's also got a good amount of value in Viego decks, but I don't think that Viego's really going anywhere unless he can go back to 5 mana sometime soon. Trying to think if there's like a combo that is broken and enabled by this. Scion comes to mind as well.
Yeah, and probably a bunch of stuff that I haven't.
Scion's actually
really excited to see what
Scion's like really broken with this, right? Hold up, because you go and we've seen like Shadow Isle is the only other region I've ever seen Scion like splashed into, because you like attack with your Scion, and they're like, okay, I won't kill it, and then you soul cleave it, which gets you Scion Reborn as well as 2 more ephemeral Scions, which are going to die and make 2. Okay, so this is actually like, if you can actually get this off with Scion, that is probably the most broken instance of it. This looks pretty broken in Sundisk. I wonder if Ziggs Talia might even... Like, Shurima decks, dedicated Shurima decks, not like Sivir Akshan or anything like that, but like sort of the more like landmark-focused Shurima decks, like Talia Ziggs and Sundisk, care so little about their followers. So being able to wipe the board on turn 4 is huge, massive. This is a really, really big card for Sundisk and Zigstalia, I think. And I'm sure that there's some other Shurima archetypes that, like Plink mentioned Nasus. I'm sure there's some other Shurima archetypes out there I'm forgetting, but like on baseline, this looks really big for Sundisk to me.
Changes, then we have.
It's just kind of like where my brain immediately goes.
Really...
Should be.
Please don't come after me if something happens.
And we should be getting our daily rumbles and stuff on Wednesday too.
The
God, I hope
past
so. My
years,
entire
yeah.
content schedule revolves around daily rumbles coming out
Okay.
Wednesday.
Want this to be
All right,
an
I'm out then.
opportunity to